Hello, everyone, and welcome to Next Day Take. I am your host, Evan Pudlo, and today we should have a good show for you guys. We're going to do a little recap of last week's playoff games, both professional and college, and we talked about them in episodes 1 and 2. So we'll do a little brief recap of all those games. We're going to talk about the news that dropped today of Mike Tomlin stepping down as the head coach of the Steelers. We're also going to talk a little bit about how that's going to transform the head coaching market and kind of what the Steelers franchise as a whole is going to look forward to. We're also going to talk about our takes from last week. We're going to talk about a few that we got right, a few that we got wrong. Try to be as accountable as possible for, when we're right, when we're wrong. We're also going to talk a little bit about what else are we going to talk about today? We're going to have another segment of My 5 Minutes. That's going to be probably one of my future favorite segments. I don't know. I've always wanted to just have like a 5 minute rant of things I want to talk about, whatever's on my mind. And, we'll talk about whatever comes our way. But without a doubt, let's get started with today's show. All right, recap. Let's start with the NFL here. So, game one of the wild card, we're going to talk about the Rams and Panthers. So last week when we had talked about this game, we thought this game was going to be closer than anticipated. We figured that this game, the Panthers and Rams, we saw these teams go to the wire last time. Panthers came out on top in that one. That was a must-win game for them. Rams weren't winning in that. That was a must-win for the Rams too. They were still in position for the one seed, still in position for the NFC West, and they came up short. Rams. If I had to put words to it, they're inconsistent. They're extremely inconsistent. To me, when I watch them, I either see this team and I see them as, wow, this is by far the best team in the NFL. You have the best coach, you have the best quarterback, you got everything working on offense, you got a pass rush on defense, and everyone's clicking. And at other times, they're extremely underwhelming. I'm like, damn, how did this team even make it to the playoffs? Not that far. I understand why, but they've just been underwhelming. They've turned the ball over too much. They've been inconsistent on offense at times. They get cold, and when they're cold, they get real cold, which worries me going into next week when they play the Bears. If you're a Rams fan out there, you have to be worried because you're either going to put up 45 points, you're going to blow them out, or you're going to put up 16, and it's going to be a dogfight, and you don't want to be in that fight with the Bears right now. All right, let's talk about the Panthers. This game makes me want to watch the Panthers more. I have not paid a lot of attention to the Panthers. Like a lot of us out there, I kind of heard the outside noise. I thought, you know what, the Panthers? Really? Bryce Young, I don't know. People were doubting them. I figure they're out of the playoffs. They're looking at a top five pick. Maybe they get, one of these quarterbacks out of college. Maybe they get whatever. We need to stop sleeping on the Panthers here. I don't know if they're a byproduct of the NFC South being total garbage. I mean, the Saints were bad, Falcons are bad, the Buccaneers are bad. Every team in that division, I think, at times this year has been extremely underwhelming. But for them to go up a team that I described earlier as potentially the team to beat in the NFL this year, and to go toe to toe with them not once but twice. I mean, they were kind of a missed tackle, perfectly spotted ball, whatever you want to call that, to the tight end there to seal the game there, touchdown for the Rams. They were one play away in both games. Well, they won one of them, and the other one they were really close from stopping them, getting the win. Bryce led a game-winning drive that I believe resulted in a touchdown or a field goal. I had to drive home, so I missed them getting up, but I saw the last play. Unfortunately, I thought the game was over anyway. But we need to stop sleeping on Bryce Young. I mean, I think if we expect him to be this Joe Burrow, we expect him to be this Matthew Stafford, this quarterback that is elevating his team to being next level, to being truly elite, where he is the difference maker. I think that is a little too far for him at this point in his career. But if you expect him, you put good weapons in front of him, you expect him to go out there, manage the game efficiently, and have a standard and set that standard and meet it each and every week. I think coming from that saving system, I think that's a place where he can thrive. Give him stability and he will continue to grow. Not in height though. Um, let's move on. Oh, one last thing. One last prop to Bryce Young. Going toe to toe with potentially the MVP of the league. Props to you, man. I'm proud of you. I didn't quite sell my stock on Bryce Young. I was close to. I think he gets a lot of slack because People saw what the Bears did with that trade, and they got DJ Moore, and they got all these players, and they got Caleb Williams. Yeah, it sucks. It sucks to be a Panthers fan in that situation, but to be back in the playoffs and starting to build upon this team. You made that trade to get Bryce Young to build this team, and you're starting to do it. I think they got the coach, the quarterback, and I think they can be fairly consistent in this NFC South. All right. Bears Panthers. I mean, Bears Packers, sorry. All right. We talked about this game and we went into a lot of detail of it. Okay, so I mean, I was very, very hesitant to put the Bears. I was very superstitious about that. To state my biases again, I am a diehard Bears fan, so I'll try to be as unbiased as possible. Let's get my notes on this. If the Bears can play a fraction of the percent of how good they are in quarter four, in quarters 1 through 3, they could legit be the most dangerous team in the NFL. Because what we saw in the second half, not just on offense, but on defense, we saw this defense be spectacular. I mean, they absolutely shut the Packers out for the most part in the second half. I mean, let's look at the stats here. I mean, I remember they started the game the second half. I swear there was probably what, three, four, maybe even I think it was just three or four, three and outs in a row in which Packers, it wasn't just like a run, kill time, run, kill time, run, kill time, punt. It was quick drives. They were getting the ball, they were throwing the ball, and the Bears, they were getting back on offense quick and fast, and they were efficient when they got on the field. So looking at the box score here, so looks it was bad. It was 21-3 going in the half. It comes 21-6 going into the fourth. For them to put up 25 points in the fourth quarter means that the door is always open for these guys. And if they just play as good, what I loved watching this was that the defense stepped up in the second half. If the defense can play this good against the Rams next week, we're talking about the Bears being legit contenders in this conference. All right, let's talk about the Packers. This is their fourth year in a row. I believe it's their fourth year in a row being the seventh seed and not winning a single playoff game. Now, we heard reports right after the game that they should fire Matt LaFleur. And I thought that was, Packers fans being really upset because you definitely should have 100% won that game. I mean, I think it was the biggest comeback victory in Bears history. I think it was the second in playoff history, but you should have won that game. There's absolutely no excuse for you losing that game. I have no idea what the Packers were thinking. I mean, I would have ran the ball 40 times if that's what it would take. So for them to just Ah, no. So I think the people out there who are saying that Matt LaFleur should have been fired, I think you need to look at the success that he's sustained, going from not just Aaron Rodgers, but to Jordan Love, and to sustain success through all those times. I think he needs to win the division next year. I think he needs to be a 12 win team next year if he wants to keep his job. I mean, I heard that they're thinking about extending him. I think that's not the best thing to do, but I definitely do think he should be on the hot seat next year to be a coach. I don't know, because we saw great teams get rid of their coaches because they did not exceed expectations and became mediocre, 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 just coming up short to where you want to see. We saw Harbaugh come up short. We saw Tomlin come up short. We saw Stefanski, two-time coach of the year, couldn't rebuild his team when he gave him junk. Like we saw good coaches this year, and Green Bay, I think they're worried that if they fire LaFleur, they're not going to get one of those guys coming to Green Bay, and it's understandably why. It understandably makes sense when you look at it. I think this game definitely showed us that the defensive coordinator and especially the special teams coordinator in the last two Bears games, Rich Bisaccia, I believe it was, former interim coach of the Raiders, he has been a liability for this team. They have McManus missing two field goals, one extra point, the onside kick, the problems that you have over and over and over again in the kicking and special team. It's just, it's abysmal and it's unexcusable at this point. I would fire him this offseason, but that's up to this Packers staff. Now let's talk about the Eagles and 49ers. Now, instead of going in depth like we did last game about the Bears and the Packers, we're going to kind of go step by step on what we have notes on for each team. So, for the Eagles, now they've already fired their offensive coordinator, and I think that was the right move. This team just didn't look the same without Kellen Moore. They needed an experienced offensive coordinator. I believe he was a guy who was promoted from within. I think what they need to do is similar to what they did when they did hire Kellen Moore, is that they need to find someone who is proven from outside the organization who maybe might be different schematically, but would bring a new edge to this offense and bring some excitement. Someone like Mike McDaniel, I think he would be a prime candidate for this position. But my notes on them, what they need to do is if they get this offensive coordinator right and they just focus on getting healthy this offseason, maybe get some more depth on this offensive line. They were extremely banged up with Malata and Johnson. I believe Johnson was out for the remainder of the year pretty early on. So if you get those guys healthy, you get the offensive coordinator right, someone who can get the most out of Saquon Barkley, get the most out of AJ Brown, get the some most out of Dallas Goedert and Devontae Smith. You have no lack of talent on this team. You just got to get the most out of it. And who's most responsible for that? Well, that's going to be on Jalen Hurts. He needs to take the next step going into next year. He spent the last 2 years kind of relying on Saquon Barkley to kind of take the game out of his hands, rely on someone else besides him to extend the ball down the field. Now, they got cheeky with doing all the tush push. They got cute with all the Saquon stuff. You had the Madden cover. That was great. You guys were fantastic last year. Saquon Barkley did not perform to the level that he is expected to carry this team to the championship. He was your entire offense. Jalen Hurts, his inability to extend the ball downfield with his throws. Now, did I watch enough Eagles games? No, but I do know this. He was not throwing at an elite level. He wasn't threading the ball deep. People and defenses could play more in the box, stop them, and they just weren't creative enough on offense to get guys like AJ Brown, Devontae Smith more involved. And I think that's why you're hearing so much dysfunction and noise coming out of that locker room. I think if you don't get the offensive coordinator right, you're going to hear a lot more of that, not just from AJ Brown, but you're going to hear more from, let's say, Devontae Smith. You're going to hear more from Saquon. You're going to hear guys wanting out, and that's going to be a huge issue for the Eagles. And this team will fall apart if they do not get it going on offense, because that's their biggest issue right now. Because the defense is playing at truly an elite level. They're honestly possibly one of the best defenses in the entire league. Vic Fangio can always put them in a position to succeed no matter what. All right, let's talk about the 49ers. My note on them, when will injuries finally slow them down? Because they haven't been slowed down all year long, and it's surprising me at this point how they've gone this far and still have not slowed down one bit. You've lost Kittle twice now. Kittle's going to be out a second time now. You've missed your starting linebackers for the majority of the year. You've missed Purdy for like a month and a half, I thought. Mac Jones was starting and he was looking like an MVP candidate. Like, what are we talking about here? Kyle Shanahan has done a masterful job this year at taking this team to the next level, but I think the injuries finally get the best of them. You know, if they don't get Fred Warner back, it's gonna be it's gonna be troublesome. Maybe they can get away with a win, but right now the Seahawks are a 7-point favorite. I know, wow. But 7-point favorite right now in the playoffs, that's a huge line there. They got the best of them in week 18, I believe. So let's see if 49ers can draw something up to get ahead, but injuries are their biggest concern right now. All right, Patriots. The Patriots offense, if they put up 16 points like they did last week, they are going to struggle and they will lose. I don't think we're going to see Drake May be the leading rusher on this team. I don't think we're going to see Ramondre Stevensons be the leading receiver. I don't think we see Drake May put up 270 yards passing. I think we're going to see this offense really struggle because this Chargers defense, it's good. It's fundamentally sound, but they are no Texans. So I think with that being said, this team is really going to struggle next week on offense. Defense looked good, but Chargers, when we'll move on to the Chargers now. The Chargers offensive line, we've known has been banged up all year long. They just could not get a break. They need to get the offensive line healthy. If I'm a Chargers fan, I'm not panicking. You got Harbaugh in that building. You're continuing to build on yourself each and every year. He's a great coach. I think your offensive line is going to get better next year. He can recognize that your defensive line is going to get better. It's going to get younger, hopefully. And, you know, it's not time to panic. Don't go into fire everyone mode. This was a year that you needed to have, but it was a building block year. So I'd be happy that you did take a next step. Just look to have a good draft, good offseason. And if nothing's done, then I'd panic. And the question remains, is Herbert still elite or was he really ever? I'm not really in that kind of wheelhouse where I believe that he was elite. I always thought he was a guy with tremendous potential and an insane amount of skill, but we never saw that come to life. We saw it in glimpses and we saw it on teams that he wasn't the best guy on the field. I mean, where he was the best guy on the field, it just kind of left you one more. It kind of left you wanting like, all right, when are they going to put the team around? When are they going to put the team around? And because of this offensive line continuing to struggle, and it's not their fault this year, but it's time to look ahead and say, hey, when are we going to put this guy with an elite offense? And then we'll see him flourish. So if that's the case, then I would put him in that next category. But until then, let's stop putting all this pressure on Justin Herbert of being the best or a top five guy in the league. He has the talent to do it, but he does not have the results yet. All right. Steelers. I want to do an entire segment on the Steelers, so I don't want to talk about them just yet because this team is going to look completely different this year. I mean, next year. They're going to have to look completely different. I'm going to give my thoughts on what they need to do this offseason. All right, Texans. Spectacular defense, atrocious offense. CJ Stroud, you tried a big bro, Caleb. It was funny last year. I know you thought you were the guy. You have struggled insanely an insane amount since then. You have not looked like the same guy you were in year one. You are you are not you're getting below game manager at this point. You're becoming a liability to this team at this point. Three turnovers, two fumbles, one pick. And if you played an offense who knew its left from its right foot, this game would have been over fast. But the Texans, congrats to this defense. You are truly a contender-worthy defense. So be proud of that. You know, I would be real proud of that. I thought this team was spectacular. Way to take the next step and, truly look like a contender defense. So for that, I'm really happy if I'm a Texans fan because this defense can go places. You lost Nico Collins, I'll worry about that next week. But just take it week by week. Hopefully this defense can carry you to another win. But CJ Stroud, you need to step it up. Now that's all our games from last week, but there's one last thing. Since we're talking about teams, does Denver need to worry about coming off the bye? This is a team that was going into the playoffs on a hot streak. They're a young team, so you kind of want to keep things going. They weren't extremely banged up. Yeah, they're going to be fresh going into this week, but man, what it would feel like if Denver got the break and they got Buffalo, I believe. So this is going to be a tough one. You know, is it going to would that bye week kill their momentum? I'm not sure. I don't know. It's tough. Moving on to the college football playoffs, let's do a little recap of what happened last week. So we saw Oregon get absolutely bodied by Indiana. Now let's move to my notes here. Let's go back to it. So Indiana, they absolutely dominated on defense start to finish, and it I'm not sure if I need to put more credit on Indiana's offense and defense or that Oregon refused to get out of their own way. Felt like they did absolutely everything they could to give Indiana more and more opportunities. And honestly, I wanted to click away almost as soon as the game started. I mean, this game got bad in a hurry. Oregon, I mean, we'll talk a little bit about the quarterbacks in our later segments, but man, did they struggle. Indiana, absolutely the team to beat. I mean, they were outstanding. Mendoza was fantastic. I slept on him and I'm wrong. I'm definitely wrong about him. So, man, good for them. I mean, Indiana, I think they're the team to beat this year. I mean, I think they're the favorite going into this. We'll do a preview matchup later in the week, and we'll kind of go step by step for each one. But man, all right, Ole Miss. Let's talk about Ole Miss, Miami. Ole Miss, man, I I had a lot of respect for Pete Golding going into this one. I don't think he I don't think I can't be too mad at this team right now for what they did this season. You know, I think the injury to Lacey early on impacted their running attack. I think if he's still in the game, this is a completely different matchup. I think this game doesn't become, I don't think this game I think they have a chance to actually be ahead of it instead of being behind late in this game. He was the difference maker. We talked about it, holding him to limit his yards, and he had the 70-yard run, but you take that away, and you had those other guys running. The running attack kind of disappeared at times. But congratulations to Chambliss. I think his uh, eligibility being revoked for next year is the best thing that could have happened because you're going to have a lot of good quarterbacks who are going to get better and get more hype going into next year's draft. And this guy, after these last few games, I think we saw him go from someone maybe taken in the fourth, fifth round and seeing Dante Moore's performance I forgot what it was, but Thursday, Friday. I don't remember what day it was, but seeing Dante's Moore's last performance, you officially are becoming the number two quarterback in this draft. I think his decision making, his physical abilities, and I think his performance are speaking for himself that are elevating him to the next level. So good job by him. Absolutely proud of him. Here's my note here. Chambliss was elite when they needed him the most. I made sure to put a bunch of stars next to that. Five lead changes, you know, 3 and 5 minutes in this one, you know, and on that last play where Carson Beck, let's talk about Miami here. We'll move on to them. So I was a heavy Carson Beck hater going into this matchup, and you know what? He stepped up. And, it felt like a kid running with scissors. It felt like a kid playing with dynamite whenever he was leading the team down the field in that last few minutes, and it felt like at any moment he's going to trip and he's going to explode. It was like, man, almost a pick, huge play, almost a pick, big play, first down. He runs it in for a touchdown. Somehow he's going to drop the ball, whatever. It was like, I'm going to hold my breath every second that he has the ball in his hand because of my previous vision on Carson Beck. But he absolutely took over this game. He stepped up when they needed him the most as well. Um, I still am concerned about his decision making. Miami did a great job of scheming guys open. He didn't have to thread the needle extremely well. He had some guys that were pretty open. So good for them on Miami. Carson Beck, he stepped up when they needed him the most. And, on that last play, man, it looked like for a second that the defensive tackle, the on the offensive left side, he gets pancaked there. And if he doesn't like stutter to get up and he gets up right away, I think there's a chance he kind of forces back to get outside, maybe give someone some time to get there. I don't know. Maybe he's there to make the play. If I'm an Ole Miss fan, I'm a little upset about that he just kind of sat there and that's why he was able to run it in. So I don't know, but man, Carson Beck, he made some spectacular throws. Shambles, he made some spectacular throws, especially towards the end. Both these quarterbacks showed their best potential in the last 3 to 5 minutes of the game. I mean, wow. Um, let's see. Yeah, that's all our notes here on the Miami Ole Miss game. Carson Beck, I mean, he's in his final year. I don't think he gets drafted based on his performance unless he has a stellar national championship game. I think he's going to be one of those guys. Maybe someone takes a flyer on him in the sixth, seventh round. But man, good job for Carson Beck to finally take the next step and look like the guy he was at Georgia, who we thought he could be at Georgia. You know, I think Indiana is Miami's worst nightmare, because they capitalize on, mistakes so much and that they're able to, they dominate at the line of scrimmage. And it felt like Miami, they need to as well to execute a good offense game plan. It felt like the majority of the game, they were running the ball really, really well. And then late in the game, they kind of left it, kind of to open it up back towards the end. So, I don't necessarily agree to that. If you're the hot hand running the ball, I'm continuing to run the ball. I don't hold back when it comes to that. So, all right, moving on to our next segment here. We are going to talk about Mike Tomlin and the Steelers. That's right. So, Earlier today, Mike Tomlin relieved himself as the head coach of the Steelers, and I think everyone kind of thought, all right, maybe he's getting fired, maybe he's doing something. But the special reason why I say relieved himself is that he was not fired. So the Steelers still technically own his rights to coach. And he said he wanted to take some time away from coaching. Everyone's speculating, where he's going to coach next. How does Mike Tomlin change the coaching sphere, coaching availability circus? He absolutely does. Because Harbaugh, going into this morning, he was the sure thing. He could pick wherever he wanted to go. He can be super selective. Kevin Stefanski was a clear number two, and it was like, all right, you know, I can't get the best job maybe, or we might be both going for the top job, but I might be looking more this way. This game, because of him being relieved, it opens up so much more. So because of that, I think we're gonna look at teams like the Titans. They're gonna be a team that is going to be a kind of sleeper team. They're going to be a team that's going to be someone who's going to be gunning for like Tomlin because they have to trade for him. So if Tomlin does go to Tennessee, he is an absolute culture changer. I don't think he's going to win it all here, but I think he'll get the most out of Cam. I think he'll put the pieces in place to get the most out of Cam Ward. I think he'll bring this team back to a respectability, and that he's going to be a culture builder. So I think like you're going to see either a team that is kind of unsung get Mike Tomlin, you're going to get a team you're not expecting that's going to overpay, pay a lot of picks to get into your building, or you're going to see Stefanski kind of slide to a team that's not that one or two spot there. You're going to see him go. What if we see Stefanski go to the Raiders? We wouldn't have said that in a million years, 2 days ago, because he was the clear number two, or he was the number one for some of these teams, and that changes when Mike Tomlin's available. Also, let's talk about the Steelers. So we're talking about the Steelers here. What do they need to do in the future? I mean, let's see, what did I write down? What did I write down? So, when I'm talking about the Steelers here, I mean, what they need to do is they need to do a control blow up. This team is one of the oldest teams in the league right now. I mean, and it's all defensively, all the salary cap is on the defensive side. You need to get rid of some of these veterans. I think we're going to see Cam Hayward retire. I think we're going to see a few guys possibly retire on that defense, but you know, these guys like Devin Bush, a lot of these guys in the secondary, TJ Watt, you need to do a control blow up. Give not just not release these guys, but trade them. I mean, TJ Watt, his stock is going to be low. I think he easily gets a first round pick still. I think if you get a lot of picks, get a coach that you're going to give a lot of runway to, someone that you're not expecting to win it all next year. If they go win now right away, this roster is not built for that. All right. If you go out and you get Harbaugh, I agree to some extent that, man, maybe that's what you want. There's some ways you can look at it and say, man, that's an upgrade. I don't necessarily think so. I think Tomlin is an excellent coach. I think he got the absolute best out of those teams each and every year. I don't think the reason they lost um, in the playoffs all these times has been because of Mike Tomlin's coaching ineptitude. I think we're seeing them have a lack of weapons from not being aggressive enough in the draft or aggressive enough in free agency to get the weapons that are difference makers. Now you got DK Metcalf, but at the cost of Kenny Pickett. If you had both of them, you would have an excellent team. Now you went and got Aaron Rodgers, but you kind of don't really have your rookie running back you got. You didn't really use them. You didn't really use perhaps Roof as much. There's weapons on this team that weren't really used. And we went from hearing Arthur Smith's name talked about being another head coach again to someone you're not really hearing anymore because of how this offense collapsed in the last few weeks, especially in that playoff game. I think that playoff game eliminated him from a lot of head coaching searches. So let's see where those guys all end up. I mean, quarterback, I mean, Rodgers, he's not coming back. You're gonna see a lot of these guys leave. DK, I think he's gonna want out of there. You need to get yeah, I would take a fly on the offensive coordinator for the Seahawks. What is it, Clint Kubiak? He'd be a good fit there, but you got to give him runway. You can't let him win in year one. You need to let this organization do a controlled blow up. offload these defensive contracts, get more picks, and maybe not even next year, maybe the following year, keep these guys, keep a replenishing stock in because when you go and you draft all these rookies in year one, you go all in on these rookies in year one. They're not going to perform. You're not going to get the picks for the following year, and you're setting yourself up to have high expectations on year one guys with not the people who had the experience to develop those guys. And I'm not saying they don't, but I'm saying a guy who's been a head coach for 10 years 20 years that you had to get a guy that was there for 18 years, he knows how to get the best out of his players more than a guy who just walked onto the job. So Tomlin, my favorite fit for him, I like him in Atlanta. I like him somewhere. I'd like him in Baltimore. I think that's an excellent fit if you wanted to go there because they have to trade for him. I don't know if that's going to be really feasible. I think the Raiders are going to go all in on Tomlin. I think they're a team that's actually willing to trade, significant draft capital for Tomlin. So I like those three destinations for him. I don't see him going to the Browns. I think he would avoid that at all costs. Um, I don't want the Giants. I think they're going to be all in on Harbaugh, or they're going to go with Stefanski. All right, let's move on to our next segment here. We are going to talk about let's go into right or wrong. Let's go into right or wrongs here. So here's a few. We're going to talk about a few takes that we got right and a few takes that we got wrong last week. We're going to try to be as accountable as possible. We're going to try to do this at least once a week. Just trying to be as much honest on ourselves as we can. Kind of keep track of what we've been talking about. Be consistent because one guy that I listen to every now and then, and I'm sure you guys have as well, is Colin Coward. And he does this similar segment now where Colin's right, where Colin was wrong. And I think when you hear him talk about his takes that he's previously had, he waters down when he's wrong. He never admits when he's completely, completely wrong, or he kind of distanced himself from the very disastrous takes. An example is that would be his view on Baker Mayfield. I mean, anyone can tell you that he hates Baker Mayfield. He's hated him since the beginning. He has never been in on Baker. But when Baker was down bad, especially when he was with the Panthers, he was all about dogging him, saying his career is over. Go back to college, be a commentator. And then when you see him rise with the Bucks, and when you see him earlier this year get MVP talk about, he's like, "Well, I was never all out, Baker. You were, bud. You were, bud. You're just trying to save face." Let's talk about some of the things that we got right, some of the things we got wrong. Okay, so where I was wrong, and we kind of touched on this earlier, Mendoza. I talked about Mendoza, and I had in my last my 5 minutes, we talked about it, and I said, man, Mendoza or more, those ain't no quarterback is worthy of a first round pick. And that was my hot take. I was very adamant about that, and I thought Mendoza was limited physically. I didn't really love him, and him not putting up elite stats, him not being limited by the schedule he had, not facing elite talent. I was hard on him for that, and for that I'm wrong. He had elite ball placement, especially on breaking routes on the outside. My counter to that is that I did see him stare down his guys a little bit. Man, it didn't matter because his guys are just better and they were beating their guys on the route. But in the NFL, you may struggle at that if you're staring down your guy. Like he would throw it with great anticipation. That's something that's hard to find in college quarterbacks these days. Guys that are throwing people open, guys that are throwing with anticipation, guys that are if he can learn to move the field with his eyes, he's going to be a good quarterback. I do worry about him physically as terms of, being truly, truly elite arm talent. And I'm talking about like Josh Allen level. So I don't think he'll be extremely limited by that stance, but I think maybe with his speed, with his legs, maybe he was pretty fast last week, but these guys in the NFL, they're faster. All right, where I was right. We're going to talk about the Panthers. Now, I kind of touched on them earlier. We talked about this game and we said, man, it's going to be closer than we thought. Panthers won it last time, is in their house again. They won by a field goal, and it really was. They were winning very close to the end of the game, and it was one kind of botched tackle, tight end, kind of miraculous play away from Panthers winning a playoff game, beating a team with a losing record, beating a team who was the team to beat in some people's eyes. So for that, I was proud of myself for that. Um, man, we did place the parlay right after last week's show, and we'll run through it real quick. So we had the what did we do here? So we had early game, we had picked the Panthers. We had picked the Panthers to cover 10.5 points. They absolutely did that. We took the Bears money line. We hit that. We had the 49ers money line. We hit that. And then we had, what was the night game? We had the Patriots money line. Um, we also had the Steelers money line. And, that's our next one. We were wrong. So Steelers, we thought they would keep it close. And you know what? If this offense was somewhat competent. If Arthur Smith wasn't the OC, maybe, then we'd be talking about the Steelers being in the next round of the playoffs. Their defense definitely played up to that level. Their offense failed them immensely, but that's where we were wrong there. But we were right on every other leg, and we were smart enough to cash out, turning $2 into 70. So we're proud of that. Thank you to my brother for making me sell it right after that, right before that field goal to make it 7-6. So um, I don't think the Steelers scored after that. So, thank you to him for telling me we gave some money. We got some beer money for this weekend. So let's talk about another thing where I was right. I think we saw Dante Moore. I think we saw his draft stock tank. If someone drafts him in the first round, I think you're getting a guy similar to. I think you're getting a guy similar to Kyler Murray without the speed and athleticism. I think you're getting a guy who is, extremely gifted. I think he can throw the ball and he can put it anywhere on the field. I think he's got a strong arm, he's got a strong legs. He's fast, he's physical. He checks all the boxes, but you're seeing him. We saw him during against Indiana. We saw him struggle to make read progression. We saw him make stupid mistakes that he's going to want back immediately, but to let the mistakes pile on, and that's the kind of quarterback you can expect. And I worry about that as a rookie. And you want to draft him high in this draft. He's not going to go somewhere that's going to have the infrastructure around him for him to succeed right away. We saw him in his college career when he had the infrastructure, he was good. When he didn't, he struggled a lot. Now, I'm not saying he hasn't grown as a quarterback, but we saw him hesitate in the pocket. We saw him hesitate to make deep uh, throws with anticipation. And we were kind of comparing him back and forth with Mendoza, which isn't fair, but that is his direct competition. He has a good combine. I like him in like the second, third round. Let him fall. If you're a team that needs a quarterback, I'm fine with letting these guys drop and being bad with that. I'm always fine with waiting on getting my quarterback until I have other pieces around. Because when you draft a quarterback, nothing to build around them, then man, you're just building yourself for failure for to get fired. All right, let's talk about another wrong. We had Oregon keeping this game close. There was a slight chance that we thought that Oregon was going to win this game, and that was just because this last game that they played in Eugene, it was close. And that it wasn't until the very end where Indiana pulled away, and that's how they won. We were completely wrong there. Indiana from the start absolutely boat raced them. It was not even close. And again, we just touched on it. Dante Moore making mistake after mistake. This receiving, this offensive line, everyone on this team making mistakes. Dan Lanning losing his mind on the field because he knows, and everyone in that locker room knows they could have played better last week. And I think he's beating himself up on that. All right. That's all the ones we're going to go through this week on my takes. So let's move on to our final segment of this episode. Let's go into my 5 minutes here. So let's get started. Hopefully, we can keep it to 5 minutes here. I don't know. But our 5 minutes is going to be about the Panthers. And we're going to talk about how we've heard a lot today, at least I have on ESPN, whatever talk radio you want to listen to, but that the Panthers and teams that are under 500 but division winners should not be able to host a playoff game. I 1000% disagree. I always am going to disagree with that. I think when you water down, and here's my reasoning behind it, when you water down a divisional win, when you water down a team beating the other teams in their division and being the best team in that division, when you water that down, you get them closer and closer to the college format where it becomes chaos, where it becomes more about someone's opinion on the team more than their actual results on the field. NFL has always been a league of just, you know what, let the results talk. Let the results talk. You know what? You can be me, I can be you can be the other guy, and we have a triangle of losing there. We don't know who's the real best team out there until we get to the end of the season. So, because it's any given Sunday. And the Panthers actually showed why they deserve to have a playoff game, host a playoff game. They went neck and neck with that team. They absolutely did. They earned the right to be a playoff team. You know, we wouldn't be complaining as much if it was the Bucks because they've won a Super Bowl recently. We talked about Baker being an MVP. You know, this team, I think it would be a little different if this team was like a 7-9 team, or not. Man, were they 7-9? Or is it whatever? If they were like a 6-7 win team, I think it'd be a little bit different. But this team's, I believe, it's 8-9, so they're all 8-9 because there's three 8-9 teams in the NFC South. So if this team was like 6 or 7 wins and they won the division, one, that is laughably bad, and I understand. But two, you can't water down these guys that are winning the division. Because, I mean, let's look at the NFC North for an example. These teams are truly getting to a point where there's real hatred. There's always been hatred between the Bears and Packers, but you feel the Lions hating on the Bears and the Bears hating on the Lions more. You're feeling the Packers, they're getting more hate from the Vikings and from the Lions. You know, it's going both ways between all four teams. You know, there's true competitive drive and there's competitive hatred going on between all four teams. And when you say, hey, you won the division, you're the best team in the division, you need to be rewarded for that because then you will see teams sitting out week 18. You will see teams sitting out week 17 and 18, you know, resting guys. We're going to see this turn into college. We're going to see this turn more and more closer to college football. And because of that, man, oof, I think that's close. I think we're at 5 minutes. I don't know. But if you don't do it, if you want to host a playoff game, I suggest you win your division. You play better. You play those regular season games and you win the games that matter. Because when you try to just give a handout to someone who may deserve it, because the schedules are made well in advance, you never know who's going to be the top team until the end of the year. And because of that, how are we to say that a team that may have less wins, but more wins against common opponents doesn't deserve to be there? I think if you have the most wins against common opponents in your division and the teams that want to beat you the most, you are most deserving of hosting that game. Because the other team that's mad that they're not hosting, like the Rams, like the 49ers, they're mad they're not hosting a playoff games. Well, maybe you should beat the teams that want to beat you the most, and then you'll host that playoff game. All right, everybody. Thank you for watching this episode of Next Day Take. I hope you guys enjoy. We'll try to break it out for you guys as much as possible, but thank you for tuning in. And if you are truly out there watching, if there's a real person actually watching, please comment down below because I'm really interested if there actually is anyone watching. I don't really think there is. I think it's mostly bots, but if you are out there, I appreciate you and thank you.